Welcome, friends, to this episode of the Sync Your Life podcast. I am so grateful and honored to have Dr. Alice Penn on the call with us today. She has been a powerhouse in what she's doing in the world, and I see her as a light, and I'm so grateful that she's taken the time out of her day to meet with us today. I know that some of the women listening to this podcast are working women, and I think that regardless of whether you work in or outside the home, we're going to talk about how hormones can really impact your life day to day. We're going to be talking a lot about how you can find purpose in your life, which I think is important. And we're going to be diving into a lot of other things that Dr. Alice is keen on. So without further ado, I'm going to let her just introduce herself, her story, and kind of share with you guys what brings her to where she is today.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Jenny. I really appreciate it and really grateful to be here. I was born in Cape Town, which is in South Africa, and eldest child, really typical type A personality. Daughter of a doctor, high achiever, sports, academics, music, did the arts, did everything, you name it, I did it. So I was that kid. And when it came to, the last few years of school, what we call university, I think you guys call college, was, decide what should I do with myself. So I remember at the time, I was probably just like most of us, you don't really know yourself very well, but I looked around and my dad's a doctor and I thought, well, medicine looks like the sort of thing that good people do. So people who were doing well at school went to medical school. So for whatever reason, I just thought, that's what I'll do. And I got in and I arrived there. I was actually only 17 years old on my first day of medical school and, ready to kick off my new life. But pretty quickly, I realized, this doesn't feel quite right. And I, not putting any blame on my parents. I brought it up a few times with them, but no, keep going. It's going to work out. So long story short, I did graduate, did my 6 years, went and did all my houseman and internship and training years. And in South Africa, we also do an extra year called, it's a community service year. Because of our sort of rural hospitals, you get sent out into the middle of nowhere for a year. And for me, that year was a pretty tough year. In retrospect, I think I actually did have PTSD. I saw a lot of things that impacted me really badly. And I'm not taking away from other people's experiences because everybody went through the same thing. But for me, for whatever reason, I wasn't in a place to be able to manage it and cope well. But I did push through and persevered. And after I'd finished working here for a while, I did what a lot of young South Africans did, and I went to the UK. I went to London for a different experience and to start life over there. And arrived in the UK, worked in medicine. And again, the feeling was there. Am I really doing the right thing? And actually, I did get a really good job in banking. But just at the last minute, I got offered a fantastic role in a really brilliant private practice right in the financial district, which is a little bit unusual, in the city in London. And I saw the salary there and I thought, I'll take that route. So I took that route and I did do well. I worked hard. I built up my patient list, but that niggling feeling it just wouldn't really go away. And, on paper, I tell people my life looked good. I'd met somebody, we got married, bought a house. I was, had a good income, but behind the scenes, I think the cracks were beginning to show already. I had quite a lot of stress in my personal life because happy to chat about it later if it comes up, but my husband was an alcoholic and an addict. And I kind of worked this out even just before we got married. I think this part of me thought, no, I need to carry on. So I went through with the wedding, got married. And I think at work, for me, although I was doing well there, I think it was a situation of sort of square peg, round hole. So forcing myself really hard to perform and deliver day on day. And the cracks did start to show. So with the buildup of that and my personal life, I started to struggle a little bit with my mental health and physical health impacted. And I decided to take that opportunity to say, you know what, enough's enough. I'm going to make a change. So I went through a process of figuring out what I was going to do. And I got a really great job in corporate finance for one of the big commercial financial advisory consulting firms in the city. And I was really, really blessed to join a fantastic team, did well there, progressed nicely up the ladder, and life was looking good. my marriage by this stage, kind of 11 years in, was really taking its toll. And unfortunately, I had to make a difficult decision and to get divorced. And because of what was going on around addiction, etc., at that time, I was left in quite a vulnerable position there in London. So I literally packed 2 suitcases and I got in an airplane and I came back to Cape Town to my family. I hadn't seen them for a while, and my sister had 2 kids, and I thought it's time to ground myself and just get home. And that's when I began the process of a lot of inner work. So I've always been a big self-development person. I grew up watching Oprah. I think I got more advice out of watching Oprah than anything else, really. But then I took it to the next level, because I think to that point I'd been, I don't have got time to meditate. I'm not doing anything like that. I was always pushing myself really hard. But I think I got this from Oprah, when they say the universe is often showing you whispers along the way, little whispers. Oh, come on, Alice, maybe this isn't the right thing for you. And you ignore them until those whispers get louder and they get into a shout. And then you're still ignoring them. It puts a wall in your way, and bam, you'll slam into that wall. So I was at that point. So I really did a lot of inner work and started to figure out where was I really, what was my next move going to be, what was right for me. And that's what led me to starting this business, where really, I guess what I do is take people through some of the process and the journey that I went through myself. So I'm doing career and business coaching and consulting. So I guess in a nutshell, I'm trying to help people take their professional lives to the next level, where they're really fulfilling their potential, whether it's in your current career, or maybe some people want to stop, quit their job, start their business, or grow their business. So quite a lot of coaching work and mixing that with actual implementation and execution. So that's how my journey led me where I was today, trying to help others really realize and fulfill their potential in their professional lives.
Yeah, I definitely see this sort of recurring theme in folks that I interview, and in my own personal story, where we tend to have lived experiences and lived struggles, and it brings us to a sense of purpose and a sense of wanting to simply help the person who's just a couple of miles behind you, right, on the same journey. So I love that you're doing this now. I also am a sort of glorified, I guess I should say, self-acclaimed personal growth junkie. While I did watch a little Oprah growing up, I got exposed to personal growth in my 20s, and I was very similar to you. I'd kind of had a really tumultuous roller coaster of a career journey up until this point, and I started dealing with my chronic health issues with my migraines and such. And personal growth was introduced to me in this really dark place in my life. And it was certainly a shining light that has definitely helped me not only transform internally. Sometimes people will say, oh, you work in health and fitness. Like, I've never seen you post a before and after. And I always say, I'm not really big on the physical before and after. If there was a way to show you how much I've changed on the inside, I try to, as best I can, to blast that on my social media of how much the internal transformation is so much more powerful. I want to come back to this. You called it a nagging feeling that just kept kind of coming back to you during these sort of years of transition and changing jobs and all the different career changes and issues you were dealing with in your personal life. I know that when you were speaking to that, I felt that in myself. Like, I remembered that same feeling that I had in my 20s. I work in a network marketing business, where I coach a lot of women, and it seems like they come in, some of the women come into the business, and because it fits their area of hobby or interest, it can exude this sort of passion from them that maybe they don't get from their full-time jobs, right? Or maybe they don't feel in their day-to-day. So I want to talk about this nagging feeling. I want to talk about, what does that look like, and how do you overcome that? How do you take the first step to maybe making a change, or really just creating the self-awareness to know that you're not happy where you are?
Yeah. So for me, the nagging and niggling feeling, in retrospect, is probably my intuition telling me, come on, Alice, you've got more to give. There's nothing wrong with medicine. It's perfect for some people. I was helping people, I guess, to a certain degree. I mean, but there's lots of other ways of helping people too. And I think it was just this gnawing feeling that just knew that there was something more that I had to give, a bigger purpose, some other reason. And as I went through these dark patches in my life, that voice was really quite loud. Like, I know there's a reason for me to be here. And I think one of the questions I asked myself after, say, nearly 10 years in medicine was, do I still want to be doing this thing in 20, 30 years' time? And the visceral feeling I had of, oh, definitely not, made me realize, you're going to carry on having the same thoughts, the same feelings, unless you do something different. And it was a big decision. It was difficult. But by that stage, I knew I actually really had to do something, no matter how hard it was going to be. So I think for a lot of people, it is actually about, I talk a little bit about the sunk cost fallacy, this idea that you have put a lot of time, energy, and money and investment into something. And it becomes, the longer that goes on, the harder it is to give up that investment. And I think that's a situation that I was in my medical career, to a degree in my relationship. And I almost had to give myself the permission to say, Alice, it's okay. Everything you've done to this point is going to serve you in the future. This is not wasted time. There's growth, there's experience. And truthfully, there were so many amazing skills that I'd learned in medicine. I mean, you think being a doctor, you're just trained to be a doctor, but I could transfer so much of what I did to my consulting, financial, commercial advisory life and world. So I think the first step is for people is to that permission slip. You know what? You can change what you're doing. You're not too old. It's not too late. If you don't change, it's sort of this balance of, if I don't change, I'm going to be having the same conversation a year's time, 2 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time. The pain of that eventually becomes more than the pain of actually taking the change. So for me, it is really all about helping people find that courage to overcome the self-doubt, to take those first steps and start looking to see what it is that they might want to do. And then there's a whole lot of things we could get into. But for me, it's that first thing, the permission and looking at how to overcome not only your self-doubt, but the self-doubt of everybody around you telling you, you won't be able to do it. It's too difficult. Why are you doing this? Etc. So that for me is kind of the first thing to look at.
I love that. I love that because this, I talk about this when it comes to health and fitness too, that oftentimes when women take my course and they start learning about their hormones and they start to understand their bodies, the resounding message that I hear is, when I took your course, I learned more about my body in a way that allows me to have permission to listen to it. And what you're saying is, giving women or people in general, right, men and women, permission to listen to your intuition. Isn't it interesting that whether it's physical or internal, we sometimes need that permission to say, it's okay to listen to my inner voice. It's okay to not necessarily abide by what society says I need to do or my family says I need to do. I just listened to a podcast yesterday and Jenna Kutcher was talking about her new book, and she was telling the story about this friend of hers. It was actually a chapter that she wrote in her book that she ended up removing from the book because she didn't want her friend to necessarily see it. And I want to share it here because I think it applies. It was all about, Jenna trying to teach the audience or the listener about what it looks like to be sort of staying in something that feels safe or comfortable when really you feel like there's something more for you, or you feel like you're made for more. And she was talking about this friend of hers who, when Jenna would say like, gosh, you seem so miserable in your job. Like, why do you stay? And the girl said, well, I've got great benefits and, I'm a frequent flyer. So I get to fly first class and I get to, there's even a ping pong table in the break room and we have so much fun. Like my colleagues and I have so much fun. She went through these sort of benefits, I guess, so to speak, of her job. And so Jenna sort of came back to her and said, well, when was the last time that you were able to use those flyer miles for like a family trip or something that you wanted to do? And she's like, oh no, I don't do that. And then Jenna's like, Well, when was the last time you actually used your paid time off? Oh, well, I'm kind of a workaholic. I don't do that. And so she started asking her, when was the last time you played ping pong in the break room? Like what are these benefits that you have? Are you using them? And the girl was very honestly, it sounded like a workaholic and was very committed to her job and not necessarily enjoying her other relationships and the rest of her life. And so Jenna said that she took it from the book because it was a very personal story, but she sent the chapter to her friend. And she said that the day that her friend read the chapter, she quit her job. It was that powerful. But to me, what that story represents is Jenna putting on paper and sort of showing the friend what her own intuition is, right? Like it's like sometimes we miss our own awareness of that intuition to the degree that it stops us or it keeps us, we want to feel safe, right? It keeps coming back to this concept of what keeps us safe versus what is for us. On a personal level, I have felt this feeling, like I mentioned before. And in 2020, when the pandemic started, my husband was teaching high school science, had been a teacher for 13 years, grew up in an education family. And several times over the past decade, the two of us have really talked a lot about what it would look like to work together. What would it look like for him to not be teaching and to be home with our girls and to help me build this business? And it always came back to like, well, we could never do that, right? Like we need the health benefits of the employer and we need this and we need that. And we just never even would research it because it was just like, well, this is against societal norm. Like one of us has to work outside the home. And finally, when the pandemic happened, I think this happened for a lot of people. It really put into perspective our life and how short it is, how much we value our health. And I think there have been a lot of people. I know I have a friend who just was like, she just up and moved to Florida because she's like, I've always wanted to live in Florida. And I was like, gosh, I'm already 40. This needs to happen now, right? Like, and so I think the pandemic did give some people some perspective on what they really want out of life. And so he retired from teaching. He's now working with me and he's actually occupying our 18-month-old as we speak. And I feel so grateful for that. But I also know that there were several years before that we just didn't even embrace the idea, right? And I'm not saying that it always has to do with like leaving a job or changing a job necessarily, but it's a good example to show that sometimes I feel like we have this intuition or we have this gut feeling. And like you said, society or the people around us are trying to pull us down. They're like, oh no, you can't do that. We even had family members, right? Who were like, well, how would that look? And how, that seems like a big risk. And so I want to talk about that a little bit more, the struggles that people face when it comes to making that change. Can you dive a little deeper for us into those struggles?
Yeah, so I just wanted to also just pick up on this brilliant story from Jenna. I saw her new book is out, so I'm definitely going to take a look at that. But I also know for me personally, one of the things that I tend to do in my life or have in the past, I've realized recently about this theme about staying safe. I think for me and maybe for many other people, it can come down to a perfectionism type trait. And so perfectionism can get you quite far. So you can work hard and you can do well up to a point, but it does prevent you from taking a risk. Because I think for me, for so long, I felt, what if I do something different? I step out into the world fully as who I am. And what happens if people laugh or it doesn't work? And that fear of the shame that might come with that, I think, is one of the big things that kept me stuck. Mm-hmm. But one of the big things that has also come out of the pandemic, just to your question around what are one of the big things, what do I see people struggling with, is this question of purpose. So you can't really get away from, on social media, what's your purpose, live your passion, a purpose-led business, etc. And certainly from my experience, especially with quite a few of my friends, our clients, people I speak to, there's almost now this new additional pressure on find your purpose. And that can actually be quite overwhelming for people. And it's one of the big problems that I see. So people are in their job, they feel like it's good, but maybe not good enough. They want to make a move, a change, whatever it is. They've got that unsettled feeling, but then they are really stuck in not knowing what it is that they should do next. And a lot of it comes down to, but I don't know what my purpose is. So for me, the thing that I would say really changed my whole outlook was just a small shift in perspective. And it actually came from listening to Rory Vaden. I think it was on Lewis Howes. I think it was that podcast, but I mean, I know you know through the brand builders, the group, that their philosophy around shifting things away from you and onto service. So what I did and what I try and help my clients do is say, look, you're sitting here now, or I was sitting there saying, what should I do? What could I do? What am I? Where are my skills? Where are my expertise? It was all about me. And I changed it. And the first question I asked myself was, okay, wait a second. Who do I think I can help?
Mm-hmm.
Who are those people, or who are the people I think I can work with or work for? So start there. And then ask yourself, and what do those people need? And how am I in a position that I might perhaps be able to serve them and help them? And when I combine that with thinking about what do I really want out of life and what do I really not want, and getting really granular about it, and also doing the discovery work on figuring out where I was in my sweet spot, I could bring that all together and realize this is the place that I need to be. When I'm serving these people in this way, in my sweet spot, then I actually will be fulfilling my purpose, because I am serving others in a really meaningful way, to the best of my abilities, with my own unique mix of innate skills, gifts, and expertise. So for me, it's that little shift, and trying to help people come out of the obsessing about what am I going to do? What's my purpose? And into where can I perhaps be uniquely placed to serve others? And it's such a subtle thing, but it can really open up opportunities for you. That was my experience.
Yeah, same for me as well. I have a similar story with really just asking myself, who is who I used to be, right? Who is who I used to be, and how can I serve them? Who do I want to walk alongside on a journey that's similar to mine? Because while I'm definitely maybe not an expert, I might be 2 strides ahead, and I can help that person navigate, right? Like where they should be and who they should be exposed to. I was talking to a new friend recently. We were kind of getting to know each other at the pool, actually. And she said, she was telling me about what she did for her career, and our daughters were playing in the pool. And she said, well, you know, I worked for this PR and marketing agency for a few years, but it was about a 45-minute commute, and it took me away from my daughter. And it was kind of a job where the boss was expecting her to be on all the time. And during the pandemic, when they were working from home, there was really no boundaries. She was just expected to respond to clients as they asked questions. And she said she got to a point where she just kind of was like, had a realization where she was like, why am I doing this? Like, what I could maybe find something else, you know, that serves me better. So long story short, she has a sort of a calling or a heartfelt feeling about working with children. And she's always wanted to work with children. And so she found a local organization to her that's a nonprofit organization that helps tutor children like after school and helps them get kind of up to speed with their reading and things like that. And she said, you know, I took a little bit of a pay cut, but she said, I now don't have a commute. I now feel like I'm living in my purpose and I'm living in my sweet spot, as you said, and I'm able to spend more time with my family. And so I think, you know, a lot of people, I mean, this is life, right? Like we navigate the ups and downs to bring us to where we're going to ultimately be. I want to talk a little bit about sort of, you know, connecting your knowledge of the sciences and the body. I want to talk a little bit about neuroscience. I also want to make sure that we talk a little bit about hormone health, because I know there are women listening who may be working full time and also maybe, you know, a mother. You know, I always like to say women wear a lot of hats, right? We're wives, we're mothers, we're daughters. We're also, a lot of us, trying to work full time or part time outside the home. So what have you seen when it comes to women in particular who are, you know, in a professional environment, who are also mothers? What types of stressors do you see come up for them?
Look, I can talk to it from my time as a medical doctor and women coming and talking to me, but also when I was in the corporate world, I ran some well-being initiatives. And the themes are always the same in terms of, as you've just said, so many different responsibilities. And added in that now, one that I don't think people have thought about so much is the aging parent, because our parents are all living longer. And a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my patients were dealing with raising their children, looking after their parents, working hard, the marriage, all of those sorts of things, and really just most of the time neglecting their own health. So we're talking earlier about reading your intuition, giving yourself the permission to read your intuition in life. And the same, I think, comes to health. So really not finding time to exercise, not looking after their sleep. And I think where I worked specifically in the corporate world, and even where my practice was in the middle of the financial district, most of those women were quite driven, hard-working, type A type personality. So they would really be driving, burning the candle at both ends and working themselves really, really hard. And that does take its toll. And I would see it every day. So I can barely think of consultations that wouldn't have some sort of psychological component to it, which actually a lot of the times just gets glossed over when you go and see your primary care physician. So really, as I say, not much exercise, not enough sleep, plenty of people drinking too much, not a great diet, and then not actually carving out any time for themselves really to address these issues and putting their family's needs first. So often women will come in and say, I'm so worried about my husband, or I'm worried about my son, or somebody else in their family, and not putting them, time for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And I know myself included, and my girlfriends who have, tried, especially in the phase of life that I'm in right now with raising small children.
Yeah.
It can be really challenging, right? Like, it's already challenging enough. I told my husband it took me 45 minutes to clean up the kitchen this morning from the disaster that was breakfast. So, and then you throw in someone who has to get to work on time, and, it's not always so easy to get a phone call from school that the kid is sick, and all of a sudden your work day goes away. You have to stop and go home and take care of the kid or whatever. I want to talk more about that, because I know that there are women who are perhaps, of fertile years, and they're maybe in their relationship, they're trying to get pregnant, and maybe they're having some infertility struggles, or they're wanting to build a family, and they're at that phase of life, but they're also trying to build their career.
Yeah.
How do you coach women through that phase of life? What are the things that you do to help them sort of navigate that?
I mean, look, in my medical consulting years, this is a problem I'd see all the time. Right now, it wouldn't be necessarily an area I would discuss in great detail with my clients. However, I can tell you from what I've seen is that where I've noticed that a lot of women, I think we all know this, are pushing out the dates, their start time to start their family. So the discussion I'd see a lot is, okay, so I'm in my early 30s, and I'm just at that point in my career where I'm up for the next level of promotion. And, at this stage, the women and the men are kind of equal at work. They've been going through the ranks at the same pace. But what you start to see is early to mid 30s, some of the women drop out a little. And this is because of starting their families. And it's very difficult for any company or any firm to, they should be doing something about it, but you can see that it does impact people's careers. So when you're looking at these women ahead of you and you're in your early 30s, you're thinking, I'll squeeze it a bit longer, 35, 37, 38. And a lot of those people have actually, say, been on the contraceptive pill since goodness knows what age. They have no idea about their fertility or their cycles, absolutely clueless. And I'm not saying don't be on the contraceptive pill. I'm just saying they haven't thought about it really. They come off the pill and then they're in to see me every 3 months, devastated because they're not pregnant. Now they're 35, 36, 37. Everybody knows fertility really has a bit of a rapid drop off from your mid 30s onwards. So this is something that I would see a lot. So how do I coach them on it? Well, I just try and be a bit real with people and say, listen, everybody is different. I've seen people in their early 40s fall pregnant quickly, and I've seen people in their 20s struggle. But if you want to have a baby, it might be a good idea not to just leave this forever and to give some thought to it. And hopefully, I know the company that I used to work for is doing a lot now to help people who go on maternity so that it doesn't impact your career as negatively. So, for example, you could split paternity and maternity leave in some places in the UK, and it can help you. However, it is a big struggle. I don't see a quick and easy way out, but I do really urge people not to just ignore their women's health side of things. Certainly, it's a very, very common theme. And I can chat to you a little bit about my own personal experience with that. But I think it is something that women, it's not at the forefront of their mind until it's a little bit late, maybe sometimes getting a little bit too late.
Yeah, you basically just described my own life. When we decided that we wanted to pursue children and a family, I was at what I considered at that time to be the peak of my career. I was in the top percentage of my company, and we were traveling quite a bit with free and paid for trips, and everything felt really great. Like marriage was good, everything was great. And in the back of my mind was this voice that was like, you're closing in on 30, you're getting older. Like if we're going to do children, we've got to do it. And so with the nudge of a couple of friends who had struggles with infertility, we started to pursue like, okay, I guess maybe we'll meet with an infertility specialist just to make sure we're good to go. Right. And when we sat down and met with that doctor, he pointed out multiple things that were not normal about my cycle, that were not normal about what I was dealing with, which sort of led us on what I'd like to call a very brief infertility journey, because we pursued adoption pretty quickly with my girls. But that had to do a lot with A, that we wanted to adopt children to begin with, but B, we also didn't want to put my headaches back at risk with my hormonal triggers. Mm-hmm. So, but long story short, that stage of my life, I wrote down here as you were talking, it felt like a choice. It felt like I had to make a choice between, do I continue down this path of building my career? And maybe for some women listening, it's that corner office, right? Like, or for me working as a network marketer, it was reaching a certain echelon of my company and being able to, do the kinds of things in our life that we wanted to do, travel and whatnot. And to me, a child sometimes felt like, oh my gosh, like, well, if I were to pursue a family right now, like my life would just completely change. Like it would just be completely turned on its head, right? Travel wouldn't be as easy and working wouldn't be as easy. And I remember it feeling like a choice. And it's hard, I think, as a woman. And that's something that I would veer on the side of saying, I'm not sure how many men feel that way or get asked that question, right? Like, if a man was ever asked, if my husband was ever asked, how did you feel when you pursued a family? Did you feel like you had to make a choice between your career and your family? Like that would not even be a question, right? A lot of the time.
Definitely not.
So without going down that rabbit hole, I think it's so true. Like, I think a lot of women in their fertile years, like 20s to 30s, when they think, okay, I need to really think about a family. I've seen so many of my friends sort of push it off. And then they get close to 30 or mid 30s. And all of a sudden it's like, well, why isn't this happening? And I just assumed I would come off the pill and get pregnant. Right. And it's a struggle. So I agree with you. Like if you're listening to this, you're probably listening because you want information on hormone health. But my first tip to you is to understand your cycle and to start paying attention to your body. Right. And to start to figure out those nuances that maybe you're not aware of right now. Because things don't always happen. Like you can't control the timing of certain things when it comes to your biology. So I agree with that. I also want to talk briefly about sort of where I am now in my late 30s is starting to meet people who are in their 40s, and they're starting to say, oh my, I've had so many women lately tell me, when you hit 40, you're going to stop sleeping. Like that for some reason, like you're just going to hit 40 on my 40th birthday and I'm just going to stop sleeping.
That's it.
And so that's it. And so I hear it so often, right? That perimenopause leading up to menopause obviously it affects a lot of women in their sleep. It affects their cognition. It affects their how they show up in their life and their energy, right? And so I want to talk about that too, because those are oftentimes also working women, and whether they're in or outside the home. Let's talk about that, like that dynamic of sort of that phase of life.
Yeah, so I think, when I was still practicing medicine, nobody was talking about perimenopause. I guess people were talking a little bit about menopause, but in the work environment, certainly nobody is interested in that whatsoever. I think it's only become a topic of people discussing a little bit more in the last few years because I've had people ask me about it. But certainly when I was practicing medicine and seeing women in their 40s, mid 40s, I cannot begin to tell you how their lives were being really impacted, and they had no idea that it was linked to the hormones, none whatsoever. Their mood, their sleep, obviously hot flushes, skin changes, menstrual disturbances and changes. Often at around that time, the menstrual cycle become a little bit more erratic and maybe even a lot heavier. So really just lots of hormonal type symptoms of fluctuations that people think, I don't know what's going wrong with me. I just don't feel the same. Some people start to struggle a little bit more with maybe holding on to a little bit more weight on their middle. Your body, you just know that your body is changing. And for some people, it's not as noticeable, and other people, it can be quite marked changes. But it is distressing because you know something is changing, you don't really know what it is. And up until recently, people just don't talk about it. And I can tell you that I have really had patients whose lives have fallen apart because of perimenopause and menopause. Relationship stress through the roof. I think often at that stage in life, you're pretty established in your career. Some people in very senior leadership type roles, or in your home environment, you've got your kids reaching a certain stage, teenagers, or different demands, different needs. Your relationship is going through different changes. People are facing at some stage, your kids are going to move out of the home. They're going through big changes in their life in general. And then your hormones are all out of whack. And people just don't really know what to do with themselves. So I think it's something that's not really spoken about. I don't know how many doctors are really asking about it. And I certainly had my own experience that doctors don't really go there that easily to talk about some of these issues around hormones and side effects. And it can be something that's sort of put on the back burner, So I think it's something that we really need to be having more conversations about. I can say that even just from the hot flashes or flushes, however you want to say that, side of things, if you're working in a suit and you start sweating in the middle of a meeting, I mean, it's extremely unpleasant and disconcerting. I think it was Michelle Obama's book, or there was an Obama story where he said, what's going on in the office? Everybody's stripping down. She said, everybody's menopausal. He said, okay, we must do something about this. I think I heard a story where she was getting dressed for Air Force One and she was drenched in sweat to change her outfit a few times. And I thought, exactly, I've seen this at work so many times. And it's so embarrassing. You're standing up, you're making a presentation and you're covered in sweat. And there should be, something that we can do to actually say, okay, well, we've got to allow people. This is actually, I'm not saying it's a medical condition, but people's lives are being impacted. We've got to give people the time and the space to work through it, to get the support that they need. And if it's impacting your work, to figure a way around that rather than putting yourself through this sort of torture. So I definitely think more work needs to be done in that area when it comes to the working woman.
Yeah. And you know what, for me, as someone who educates in this area on women's hormones, I just recorded a solo round that's already live. I'll link to it in the show notes, about just the menstrual stages as we age. Yeah. And it's fascinating to me how many women are not aware of what those changes look like, what's involved. When you mention adrenals, they're like, what are your adrenals, right? Like there's so many questions around what our body's supposed to do, which I think does somewhat come back to what we're educated on through school and all that kind of thing. But I also think that, people ask me the question all the time, and usually it's with a laugh. They'll ask me like, well, what does your husband think about, you talking about like periods and all that? Like, what is he? And I'm always thinking to myself, like, well, I wish more men knew and more men understood, because turns out women make up, right, half of the population. And we have periods and we need to be talking about it. Right. And it drives me insane. I follow somebody, her name is Dr. Stacy Sims. She's known for her TED Talk called Women Are Not Small Men. Yeah. And she is also very forward thinking about this idea that yes, women have periods and yes, we should be talking about them. Right. And we do talk about things like pregnancy and, it's interesting to me how often you see it, whether it's in real life or portrayed on the media, how women are just sort of expected to, like, I was just around my daughter's school, and there was somebody, I said, oh, congratulations on being pregnant. She's a teacher at the school. And another teacher made the comment to me, like, oh, I don't think she's going to come back. She's just the type that, like, when the kid's born, she's just going to stay home, whatever. And it's like, why is that part of our conversation? You know what I mean? I mean, it's just, why is that expected? So it comes back a lot to, I think, this portrayal in society, and this, what we're talking about, what we're okay talking about, what we're not okay talking about. And I think that if we were more accustomed to the types of conversations that I know we have in my household, right? Like, my husband knows when my period starts. He knows what day of my cycle, what day of my cycle I'm on. He knows He knows probably more than most men. I've actually had people ask if he can come on the podcast and talk about it. But if more men understood the woman's body, but first it starts with the woman understanding her own body, I think we would have, these types of things would be more normal. These types of things would be sort of commonplace, as opposed to weird. I heard somebody say recently, they were like, I learned more from like menstrual pad and tampon commercials about my period growing up than I did in school or than I did in sex ed. And it's actually like, when I heard that, I thought to myself, that's actually true, right? Because I'm picturing like the old school commercial of, this is how you bleed heavy on your first day. And it was explaining that. And I thought to myself, like, wow, yes, that's been my experience, but no one's ever told me that should be the experience, because we just don't talk about it as women. It's just like this hush hush topic that's, no one discusses. So I think it should become more of our norm. There's another expert that I listen to who talks about this idea that women have an infradian rhythm, obviously, in alignment with oftentimes the moon and the moon cycles, and that we sort of, our energy shift from week to week, right? And over the different phases of our cycle, whereas a man he just lives his life according to the typical circadian rhythm. So our society has adapted to this circadian rhythm in this 9 to 5 work environment. And, everything that we do day to day sort of follows a man's physiology. Whereas women, like, what would it look like if women were encouraged to work in alignment with those energies, right? When they're more, in the early phases of their cycle, when they are more sociable and interactive, perhaps putting them in the environment of leading meetings or facilitating and having sessions in front of people, versus maybe in the luteal phase where they're better at planning and strategizing and that kind of thing. I think that would be a powerful, powerful world if we could embrace the fact that women are different, that we are not small men, and that we deserve that attention when it comes to just living life day to day. So that's sort of a side note, but I do want to make sure we wrap up with this idea of, keeping the brain healthy, because this all comes back to not just, it ties in beautifully. And I think, mental health is sort of a trendy topic right now. All of a sudden, it's kind of become the cool topic that people are talking about. But even whether or not it's cool in society or not, doesn't matter to me. It's still important that we discuss. So I'd love to hear, what are your tips on keeping the brain healthy, and especially as we talk about, women in the workplace?
Well, I think for me, what I always try and speak to all my clients about, men and women, is that the brain is really at the center of everything we do, the brain and the neural and nervous system. So even we're here today talking about women's hormones, everything that regulates our cycles, it all starts in the brain. The brain is responsible for literally everything we do, everything we think, we feel, our behaviors, our actions. So when you understand how your brain works, or your whole neural nervous system works, you can do what I say, you take control of your command center. So once you understand the science, then you are able to actually step in there and take control and actually make changes to really benefit your health. So that is why I'm so passionate about thinking about the brain. And the brain is a bit like a garden. It needs a lot of attention and time. And we need to do the same thing with our brain. So it needs weeding, it needs water, it needs new seeds and planting, sunlight, nourishment. And this all translates into what we should really be doing and how we think about our brain. So the number one thing really is sleep. And there's sleep really, I think all the studies are showing, is now probably the single most important thing that we can do to benefit our brains, and therefore really positively impact all of our hormonal functioning, really everything. So it's a topic I'm really passionate about, probably because I slept extremely badly for most of my life. And I can tell you, just even personally, improving your quality and quantity of sleep will change your life. So great book by Matt Walker called Why We Sleep is a great one to read, very easy and accessible for everybody. So I really recommend that. The second one is our nutrition and exercise. Now, I am not somebody who likes to lecture people about what they eat, and I don't want to be sort of dogmatic about things, but nutrition is really, really important. And on the whole, I know you give a lot of advice around this: whole foods, balance, not a lot of processed, refined foods. Certainly, extremely high levels of sugar are not going to be good for your brain, focus, attention, etc. And something we can all supplement with is the omega-3 fish oils. It's very difficult to get enough of that purely in your diet. So that's a real, an easy one for everybody to add in. And definitely every single study evidence says this is, extremely beneficial to the brain. And then exercise, anything that improves blood flow to the brain. So it could just be a walk, it could be yoga. It doesn't need to be hours in the gym, pounding the pavements, running for hours on end. I've certainly someone who's prone to over exercising and it's not actually necessarily good for you. So just getting out there and getting movement is really important. And then like the garden needs light, we also need daylight. And this is part of, you mentioned circadian rhythms. When we expose to daylight, apart from the vitamin D that we get from it, it actually, the light actually passes through your pupils, hits the back of your eyes. The back of your eyes directly linked to your brain. The sense signals through to your brain that it's time to start releasing your cortisol and your other neurotransmitters and neurochemicals to start getting all your other hormones and chemicals in your body going. So these are some of the key things from the health point of view. And then you mentioned mental health, but of course, mental health is a big topic, but the brain, as I said, does so many things apart from just dealing with our thoughts and emotions. But I do believe that we really need to spend time focusing on dealing with how we're thinking and how we're talking to ourselves. And, a big light bulb moment in my life, I'm surprised I came to it so late, but it was to realize that not everything I think is actually true. And I don't have to do everything that I think that I'm thinking about. You need to really start questioning how you're talking to yourself and what you're actually thinking. And, there's some things that I do with my clients about asking yourself, a simple test, is what I'm thinking true? Is it absolutely true? How is thinking this making me feel? And then you realize it's not serving me. Okay. And if I think the opposite, how do I then feel? So I think it's really important for people to spend time working on their brains from all these angles. Meditation is very useful for helping self-awareness. I'm not saying that everybody needs to meditate, but I do feel that you need to bring some sort of mindfulness, self-awareness, be able to catch how you're thinking, catch how you're behaving, your responses to things. And this is all part of our brain health. So, that's a kind of high level overview. And there's obviously lots of life hacks, people will call them. I don't like to call them that, but lots of tips and techniques for really boosting your brain function. And especially as we're getting older, it's really something we need to do to take care of it. So yeah, those are kind of my key takeaways on that front.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that because that gives people the idea that your mind and body is connected, right? And a lot of times our thoughts control what we do. And I've said this before on the podcast, if you think about even just a difficult move in your workout, right? And I always like to tell people, when I used to be training in the gym with clients, I would tell them, is it your brain that wants to quit or is it your body that wants to quit? And 9 times out of 10, it's actually your brain that wants to quit. So training the brain, right? Like whether it's through personal growth, meditation, even just the basics of making sure you're getting enough quality sleep, can help you not just with physical performance, right? But with everything. And so I think that's a beautiful connection to wrap up that way is great, because I think the people listening, I think sometimes people don't want to admit that making, transitions in life or making changes to be a better person, we overcomplicate it, right? We think like, well, what's it going to take? Or what am I going to have to do? Or is it going to be too hard? We make this story in our brain. And really it's like, at the end of the day, you can control what you can control, right? Like you can control how you react, you can control how you breathe, you can control whether or not you're getting enough movement each day, which is a big issue, at least here in the US, right? Like just, are you fueling yourself? And I don't just mean with food. I mean, are you fueling yourself in the right ways to be mentally healthy? And I love that we've wrapped it up that way. The one thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't mention earlier is I resonate with you on so many levels. When at the very beginning of this, you talked about being an achiever. We've also talked on this podcast about this idea of perfectionism. I see this in so many women, is this idea that like, we have to always do more. We always have to, I'm the girl who carries all 40 grocery bags in from the car at one time. But I think there are a lot of women out there who are those type, that they think that they can wear all the hats and do all the things. And, as long as they don't fall over, like they can do it.
Exactly.
And the reality is that if we're not pouring into ourselves first and taking care of ourselves first, we start to see, I like to call it, the check engine light starts to flash. And so whether that manifests through hormonal imbalance, whether that manifests through, sleep disturbance, or this inability to cognitively function, regardless of what it is, it will eventually catch up to you, right? You cannot carry all the grocery bags in at once, all the time,
All the time.
without something crashing. And so hopefully, someone listening to this, I'm sure, is thinking, okay, this has given me a lot of awareness on things I need to be thinking about and things that I can do to implement into my life. But I would love for you to direct people, to you. Where can people find you online if they want to hear more information about what you do? Take it away and let us know.
So I'm most active at the moment on Instagram, but I'm going to grow to TikTok, I think, soon. But I'm on Dr. Alice Penn. That's ALICEPENN. And my website is dralicepenn.com. And I have a download masterclass there at the moment, helping people figure out what their next best move could be in their professional lives. And I've got some really practical exercises to help people take some steps to see where they might want to move next and take their professional lives to the next level. So if anyone's interested, just take a look and download. But just want to say thank you very much for having me on. It's been really great.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for doing this and for sharing your light with my world and with my listeners. So we will link everything up in the show notes for everything she just said, so you guys can have ease of access to that. But thank you, Dr. Penn, for being with us today. We may have to have you on again in the future to dive deeper into this concept, but I love just helping empower, especially women, but people in general. I love empowering women to really discover their purpose, and if they're having that nagging feeling, if they're feeling like maybe they just aren't doing what they're meant to do in the world, if they're meant for more, I think, checking out Dr. Penn's website and really maybe listening to this again and thinking about things that you can do to make that next step and make that transition. We only get one life, right? And life is short. So exactly. It's worth paying attention to. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Jenny. It's been great.
And we will talk soon. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks so much. Bye.